This will be our first bill hearing of this session. So, any bill introductions today? I don't believe there are, but we wanted to open it up. Seeing none, we will move on. The committee, a couple of things. You were sent the minutes of the January 17th, 18th, and 19th committee meetings. And so hopefully you all had a chance to review them. So at this time, I will entertain a motion for approval of those minutes. Moved by Newland, seconded by Shu. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carried. This week's minutes will be released tomorrow afternoon for your perusal over the weekend if you don't want to watch the Chiefs game. So some people don't. Can you believe there are people in Kansas that are wanting that team from Ohio? My. All right. But there's also, we have to educate some legislators that there are people west of here that do cheer for the Chiefs and not all for the Broncos. So, okay, let's get to it. We'll open the hearing now for House Bill 2479, and we will call on Revisor Hamilton for an explanation of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2479 would amend the miscellaneous violations section of the Kansas Wildlife and Parks laws and make it unlawful for any person to capture or possess an ornate box turtle. Unless otherwise provided by law or rules and regulations, any violation of the state's wildlife and parks laws is a Class C misdemeanor. Under current law, the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks has the authority to establish the number of wildlife that may be taken by a person for any one calendar day or open season. The applicable regulation in this case states that no more than 5 of any one species of reptile may be possessed. The amendment made in House Bill 2479 would override such possession limit as it currently applies to ornate box turtles and completely prohibits the capture or possession of ornate box turtles. House Bill 2479 would become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. With that, I'd be happy to answer any preliminary questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What exactly is the penalty for a Class C misdemeanor, like a certain level of fine? Or?
From what I recall, I believe it's up to $500 for a fine and then up to a month in jail.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Newland.
So is there regulations then that says that you cannot possess more than one of these turtles? Is there a regulation that would state circumstances that you may acquire more than one of these for a short period of time, like for kids racing turtles or something? Is there a statute for that? Or regulation, I should say.
My understanding of the current regulation is that for any individual, the limit is, any given day, you cannot possess more than 5.
Other
Per
question?
individual.
Oh, go ahead.
Per individual?
Let me pull up the regulation real fast. Looks like it does not specify, it doesn't make a reference to a person or individual. It just says no more than 5 of any one species of reptile may be possessed. And that's the end of the provision. So it does not clarify.
Thank you.
Representative Carlin.
Kyle, first line there says, line 6, section 1, it is unlawful for any person to. So that's the new bill, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's old language from existing statute that's being amended by this new bill.
Okay, where is the change of that?
The new language can be found on the first page in line 33.
But it does not strike that. So since it doesn't strike any person, I would say the answer to Representative Newland's question would be any person.
Correct. Now, yeah, if this were to go into effect, no person could
Okay.
possess any
The
number.
old law should be right here. I don't know why it isn't. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, and to clarify, again, it's in statute, the secretary's broad powers allow the secretary to set the daily limit, but that limit is not expressly put in statute. It's spelled out in rules and regulations. And so the legislature, it never amends regulations directly. It amends the authorizing statutes and thus overrides the more specific regs.
Okay. Other questions? Representative Probst.
This bill has fascinated me from day one because of which you'll hear in a little bit. But now I'm thinking about this turtle race thing. Is there a minimum age that a juvenile can be prosecuted for a crime? If we're talking about the turtle races, I'm wondering, can a 12-year-old even be prosecuted for a Class C misdemeanor?
Well, I would defer to the department about enforcement questions.
May get that answered soon. Well, it is true. It is true. Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a quick question too. I didn't really look at the bill too much, but what if you raise them for eating, you know, because used to have a lot of turtle fries in our country. Is that illegal then?
So the bill, the new language just says very broadly prohibits possession or capturing. So I believe, you know, hanging onto the turtles, possessing them for that purpose, any amount would be prohibited.
So why would that be different than shooting a pheasant and eating it? I don't mean to
Different
pick on you,
species,
sir. Just
I guess,
asking
is
the question.
the key issue.
I know it's kind of crazy, but just curious because we used to eat a lot of turtle. It's really good, you know. Okay, sorry.
We might find out from some of our testifiers.
There you go. Thank
So
you.
maybe ask that question. Other questions from committee? For Kyle? Okay. Thank you very much. We will now start with proponents. And first up, we'll welcome Secretary Brad Lovelace from the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, joining us via WebEx. Mr. Secretary, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Chairman Rogers and members of the committee. Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks supports House Bill 2479 and the idea that ornate box turtles need more protection to sustain their population in Kansas. We appreciate Representative Gardner and co-sponsoring legislators' efforts to help this important species in our state. Our charge as an agency is to conserve this species along with all of Kansas wildlife. This happens to be in the non-game category, but we are concerned about declines with a number of these species, and the ornate box turtle would be included in that. While we do believe that the current allowance of 5 of these turtles is not the cause of these declines, we had been working in the same direction as Representative Gardner in talking about and moving toward a reduction in that number. So we're all on the same page, I think, on this. We think it's prudent to go down to 1 or 2. We think it's wise to allow, for instance, 1, so that if a child finds one, wants to keep it, learn a little bit about it, and then release it back to the wild, that's still legal. So we think there's benefit in that, and would promote that. We suggest, because we have another pathway to work with these kind of initiatives, we suggest that we move this to our non-game Wildlife Action Committee, which incorporates a wide variety of stakeholders and discusses things just like this. If, for instance, 5 is too many, we should reduce that number, or we should, have other protections for this species or any other species. The process we use then, and the revisor mentioned this, then it goes from that group, their recommendation goes to our commission. That is part of a 3-part open meetings process, minimum 3, could be more than that, that allows for public input. And again, all stakeholders can come out, and individuals, and express their support or concern about an idea that we have. And then once it works through that process, then the commission, based on that input, can decide if they believe it's warranted to make a change. And so we think that's a good process. We think that would work very well in this case, and would offer that as a route to get to, essentially the same point, but by a little different, more publicly open process. And so that's what we would suggest for today. But again, we appreciate the initiative here. We're all moving in the same direction because we think this species needs protections. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Secretary Lovelace. Questions for the Secretary? Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's been an issue brought up too about Native American cultural usage. I would have to admit that my tribe is from the desert Southwest, so I don't really know much, but was tribal or Native American culture consulted or taken into consideration? Do we know that?
Supervisor.
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary. Just to kind of clarify, I think for myself and maybe the group, so you are suggesting in lieu of the bill that we're hearing today, would you support the intent of to just take this alternate route that you've outlined?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, are there any rules or regs pertaining to harming or injuring an ornate box turtle in any way? We've been talking about possession. Are there any other rules and regs that go along with that?
Yeah, correct. You aren't allowed to harm them. I mean, we understand that people may currently, the way our regs are, they can possess them, but they have to basically take good care of them and release them back to the wild in good shape. In contrast, we have some other species that are game species like snapping turtles. Someone pointed out that some of these can be good to eat, and that's correct. So we have a possession limit for those, and those obviously can be harvested for the purpose of killing and eating, but that's not true for these non-game species.
Mr. Secretary, what's the youngest person you've arrested for being in possession of more than 5?
So I don't know the answer to that. I'm trying to think if my law enforcement folks, we reviewed our record with this regulation a few days ago, and there was a case a few years ago where a person was collecting these from several states and shipping them overseas. But we don't have, and also we had a case a couple of years ago where we were at a person's residence and the child said, "Hey, come in the backyard and look what we've got." And they had like a dozen turtles in a pen, and that was over their limit. That was an adult. So I don't know that we've ever approached anybody less than adult, about this reg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions? Representative Haswood for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Secretary, would you be, I know you explained the process of this. Would tribal input or Indigenous Native American peoples would be part of the process? And would it be possible if it was to be found culturally significant to have that in?
Sure, the process that we use is open to everybody. I don't know, in the time I've been here, if the tribes have ever got involved in that, but we would be glad to reach out to them and make sure they're included and know they're invited to participate in that. As you're aware, when it comes to tribal lands, there are broad allowances for harvest of game and use of non-game species for tribal uses. And so there's broad allowances there. But we'd be glad to involve them in the process. That would lead to better outcomes and us to make more informed decisions. So I will make a note of your suggestion and we'll reach out to them and make sure they're included in the process.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Secretary, just a couple right quick, kind of follow up from what we had from the reviser kind of gave the overview of the bill. What about, you know, a youngster that, you know, is going to do turtle races at a celebration, say they would have 6, maybe they, you know, like sometimes when we show cattle in 4-H, we have a pen and then we decide which ones we want to use. And then of course, at the end of that time, they turn it back out. So, and I know I'm being a bit facetious, I guess. I don't mean to be that way. I have a lot of bad jokes that I'm holding off not doing, but in Syria, I mean, I'm guessing, you know, while we want to make sure we're doing the right thing, we also have to have discretion, regardless of whether it goes to this kind of ad hoc committee or legislatively, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. Discretion is a good term to use because our officers routinely use that when they come upon a circumstance where an innocent mistake was made. We inform the person and correct it. I see notes all the time where a person accidentally took an animal that they didn't intend to. They notify us and we work with them to resolve it. Those are well-intentioned mistakes,
Sure.
and we have a lot of leeway to allow for those.
The other question that was brought up, and if you know, as far as the numbers, and you know, years ago, you know, maybe they had celebrations where they used box turtles as a meal or as a primary protein source. Would this make it illegal to say if you had a community group or one individual that it was their turn to bring the turtles, if you will, to the party? I guess kind of help me explain all that, you know, as maybe as things have evolved.
Right. So the prohibition is against commercialization of these non-game species. And so if you wanted to have the number that you are allowed, if it's 5 now, or if it ends up being 1 or whatever, and you wanted to use it personally, that's your choice, right? But
Okay.
if you want to sell it, that's where we get into trouble.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for the secretary? Seeing none, Secretary Lovelace, thank you for joining us, and maybe stand by in case we do have some late questions.
I will.
Next proponent we have is Judge Diane Glenn. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I don't want to take too much time because I want to leave the time for the experts. I'm truly here today as a layperson, just to let you know. And I know my husband's listening. He said he was, and he corrected me last night. We actually live on a 2-section piece of land, not just 1 section. So we're talking 1,200 acres. We've been there 34 years. We used to have turtles everywhere. They would be in the garden, they would be under the bushes. It was common for my husband to pick one up, bring it, show it to our daughter. We were always going out to check them. We noticed when she was in high school, which would have been between 2005, 2008, where we really saw a big reduction in the number of turtles, and it's pretty rare that we see them now. I'm one of those annoying people who stops on the road, picks them up and moves them across when I see them on the way to work or on the way home. I don't see that anymore. And I would tell you that to me it's significant because in the area that I live in, it is unchanged. We have the same people living there, hasn't really changed for 34 years. They don't burn, they don't till, nobody farms there. Most of it is truly grassland. A few cattle run on the north end, mostly just a few horses up on the south end. So I was really confused when it first happened. So was my husband and daughter. When I became a docent for the Topeka Zoo in 2017, I really began to learn more about this process and about things that were happening. And it was shocking to me that there was the illegal collection. But I have read a lot about it. We have studied at the zoo, and I can confirm certainly that I've read stories about that too. So that's very concerning for me. I actually took part in surveys. The Kansas zoos are doing surveys, and I think Mr. Dinwiddie will talk a little bit more about that. But we actually have 2 plots of land that we go to. They're in secret places. We don't tell where they are because we don't want anyone who collects turtles to know where we're going. But we go on a regular basis, and we get in a group of 10 or 15 people, and we canvass 10 acres at a time, and we look for box turtles. We have found a few, but we have not found very many, which has been very alarming to us, especially as docents, and then for the zoo staff that run those. The only other thing I would comment on when you talk about the exceptions, I hear your questions, and boy, these really are good questions. Because obviously you can't just say nobody can have a box turtle. Kids really need to be able to do it. You know, the thought even occurred, we mentioned back here, there could be a breeder of ornate box turtles. I don't know for a fact. And if they take their stock from the wild to breed, I don't think that's appropriate. But if they have breeding stock that are not wild turtles, maybe that's an area you need to look at too. So, you know, I applaud you for looking at this. Please keep this alive, and please at some point in time try to pass this favorably. I think it's important for all of our kids in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Glenn. Any questions? Saying none, thank you. Stand by. We may bring you up at the end if there's other questions. So next up from proponents, Dr. Benjamin Reed. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me and the rest of the committee. So I'm very excited to be here actually as a proponent for this bill. So just a little background. So I have a PhD in biology. My entire dissertation has focused exclusively on the ornate box turtle. Since then, I've gotten an assistant professorship. I'm in my 4th year, and of those 4 years, in my position, I've continued to study box turtles. So I'm in my 10th year of studying box turtles.
Could you turn the microphone down a little bit so we can hear you with that? And if you're comfortable leaving your mask on, that's fine. If not, we can hear a little better. So
Is everybody okay with it off?
That's
okay.
better. We can hear you better now.
All right.
So thank you. Continue.
All right. So like I said, I'm in my 10th year of studying box turtles professionally. And I've done just a lot of work in a lot of different aspects of turtle ecology. And today I sort of had 3 separate things I'd like to discuss with you all to kind of get you guys thinking about why this bill is important, whether or not we proceed with this version or the version that was suggested earlier. But first, I'd like to just talk about the ecology of a box turtle. And I could talk about the ecology of box turtles all day, and I know you're not necessarily here to hear about ecology. This is like my pride and passion. But there's a few important things that I think we need to consider when we're thinking about this bill and why it's so important that we don't allow collections from the wild, especially at 5 at a time. And first, the current bill says, or the current legislation says that you can have, a person could have 5 in their possession at any time, which means a family of 5 people could have 25 turtles in their house. So there's kind of a loophole right away that you can have a lot of turtles with a small group of people collecting. But for the ecology itself, so these turtles live to be 40, typically around 35 to 40 years old. But as you probably all heard, they can live to be up to 100 years old. The problem with box turtles in their life history is that they don't reproduce until they're 10 or 15 years old. So they have to make it to 10 or 15 before they even reproduce. Any single clutch will only be 3 to 5 eggs, and most clutches, they have complete loss. No individuals will make it to adulthood. In fact, for one turtle that lives for 50 years, it'll be a successful turtle if they successfully recruit one individual to replace them as a breeding adult. So any single turtle you remove from the habitat, you're removing permanently an individual from that population, will then continually escalate the decline of populations over time. Right? You're just getting fewer and fewer adults that are breeding, and your population will decline over time. Since I've been in Kansas, I cannot tell you guys the number of people that have told me that, hey, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we saw turtles all the time. And as Diane just mentioned, you don't see them nearly as much as you used to, right? And the problem is what we're doing now, you won't see until 15 years later. I have a whole bunch of articles, and I'm going to go through a few just to kind of highlight some stuff. But basically, the idea is our actions that we're doing today, you won't see necessarily decline until 15 years from now, and you'll continually see that decline moving forward. So I think it's sort of our goal and role to prevent that decline now, so that 15 years from now, that decline may stop or slow. So that's the sort of the life history component of these turtles. I do want to talk about some importances of the turtle as well. So why do we even care that turtles exist in our habitat? For a lot of people, you think of a turtle and you just think of this like useless, slow creature with a heavy shell that just wanders around and doesn't do much. That's actually not the case. So most of my studies focus on the ecology of these turtles. We put radio transmitters on turtles and we track them and we find what they do, and we look at behaviors and we look at important outcomes of turtle activity. And beyond a number of things, they are important, particularly important in seed and spore dispersal. They eat lots of fruits, they eat lots of fungus that then get dispersed elsewhere. Their gut is successful at germinating seeds and spores that other creatures are not successful at germinating. Therefore, turtles can be considered a keystone and ecosystem architect for restructuring habitat. So they're important for reintroducing native plants back to local habitat. In addition to seed and spore dispersal, they also are important predators for lots of pests. So they eat lots of insects and other things that most people don't like. Right? So they're eating things that are invasive. They're eating things that without box turtles will get out of control. In addition, they eat eggs, so they will raid ground nests. They'll eat small rodents, believe it or not. They eat frogs and toads. So they have an important role in trophic cascades as well. They have an important top-down effect. In addition to their top-down, actually, I like to joke with my students that they're an apex predator because as adults, they don't eat, nothing eats them, but they eat everything. In fact, I have pictures of them eating dead deer, and I have a picture of one eating a dead coyote, so the turtle has one. So in addition to being important top-down effect, they also eat carrion. Eating carrion, as we may know, is really important for preventing the spread of disease. Turtles are important for eating dead things, so disease and bacteria and whatnot won't spread. Right? So they are filling a role that something like a turkey vulture may also fill, but they're doing it as an ectotherm. Ectotherms are cold-blooded. That's the sort of old school term we use, but basically they have lower metabolic rates, which means we can in theory sustain high numbers of them, and they can do a lot of ecosystem services. I think there's a few people that have done cattle ranching. I have a number of field sites where my students and I do research. Again, I won't disclose them for lots of reasons, but basically poachers target field sites where people do research. Poachers will go to conferences, figure out where people are doing their research, and then go and poach those lands. That is absolutely 100% true. And there's a number of people with PhDs that have said that. That's a problem. Personally, I collaborate with someone at College in Iowa, and they have two major populations. It's basically the box turtle study site over the last 40 years. It's an amazing place. One of their populations got disclosed, and now it's gone. They've been poached. People were caught in the act poaching these turtles, but not until it's too late. And that population is functionally extinct, which means there's no a possibility of them returning on their own accord. They'll have to be reintroduced by us. For the cattle ranchers, though, turtles are really, really important for breaking down cow patties. That's the term I use. There's probably a better term for that. Basically, what they do is they go into the cow patty, they eat out the bugs, but they also eat out the partially digested grass materials. So they're able to get a lot of nutrients. But more importantly, what they do to a cow patty is they spread it around and they smoosh it all around on the habitat. And so instead of having this hard block that you get that grass can't grow through, instead you have nice fertilized land that grass will grow through. And I have a number of ranchers who I work with that say, hey, the turtles are great because they do this for me, right? So any rancher I've ever interacted with says turtles are great for their property if they truly know what's going on with their property. So that's sort of the ecology and why we should care. I could talk to you about a million other reasons why we should care about turtle ecology, but I'm going to move on. I'm feeling like some people are looking kind of bored. This this is like really, really exciting for me, by the way. I wasn't going to bring this up when I was told I should. I have been studying box turtles and turtles in general since I was 5. And kind of like how you have like 4-year-olds that are obsessed with dinosaurs and like know more about dinosaurs than you do as an adult. That's how I was with turtles, but I just never moved away from turtles like anybody else. So I just like continually have grown my knowledge of turtles. And speaking of dinosaurs, the turtles have outlasted the dinosaur. They existed before the dinosaur. They persisted through 2 ice ages, and they continue to live on. Their biggest threat now is us, which is kind of a shame. So the turtle, in addition to their importance ecologically, I'd also like to just kind of point out a few of these articles I brought. I'm not going to read them through. It seems like hopefully people get an idea. But I just, and before I forget, we're talking about, this is just a fun fact. People who are mentioning eating turtles, people do eat turtles, particularly snapping turtles, alligator snapping turtles, and some of the larger aquatic turtles. People don't eat box turtles, and if they are, they're making a potentially life-threatening mistake. Turtles eat a lot of fungus, and then they sequester these toxins, and there are records of people dying from eating box turtles because they're basically poisoning themselves by eating turtles. All right, so if culturally people out west or wherever are eating box turtles, I've not heard of that. People have not eaten turtles in any sort of record that I've seen, box turtles that is, ever. This is something that we're like, hey, yeah, turtles are not a thing we should be eating. If you look at the coloration of turtles, you can actually see in their oranges and yellows that they are sequestering those toxins, and they sequester as yellow and red carotenoids, which is why they have that beautiful coloration. The unfortunate part about that beautiful coloration is it makes them an ideal target species for collectors. And so that's sort of the issue that I'd like to bring up next, which is poaching. And that's the part of this bill that I think that we're not talking too much about, but is the important part no matter how we go about addressing it. And that is, this is a stack, and I know people online can't see this, but this is a stack of articles, popular news articles, specifically addressing box turtle poaching in North America. We're talking ranging from 10,000, a few cases were 20 to 200, and then 10,000, all these things. There are 7 box turtle species in the North America. The ornate box turtle is one of them. I'd also like to mention that I propose that we also add to this the 3-toed box turtle, which is equally basically endangered as well in terms of their likelihood to persist. Right now, the current bill says ornate box turtle. I say we strike ornate and just leave it as box turtle. I don't know if I can say that now, but that's a suggestion. But these articles are basically stating and showing that poaching is a real problem. So if anybody wants to see these, I've not made these up. These are real. I mentioned I started collecting turtle or studying turtles since I was like 6. I asked my mom 2 nights ago to go through an old binder at my house in Pennsylvania where there's eastern box turtles, and she collected for me 12 articles that I printed off about poaching as early as 2003. So this is a problem in the United States. It's a problem in the United States because there are no box turtles left in Asia. All populations are critically endangered or extinct, and so the Asian markets are predominantly where turtles are shipped to. And so since there are no turtles in Asia, people are focusing their efforts more on United States turtles, U.S. Turtles. And these articles show that. You could kind of see the trend, and they start off in Asian poaching, and now they have shifted to North American poaching. So poaching is a real problem, and again, I don't really know how else to prove that to you besides just kind of reading these, which I won't do, but hopefully you see that. Am I at time?
Kind of.
Okay.
If you could wrap it up.
Can I say one more thing about the cultural relevance? So I think the important. So one, they're the state reptile. By the way, we have 33 states with state reptiles. 20 of them are turtles. So people care about turtles and like them, but they know nothing about them. But they are culturally relevant too, aside from just being the state reptile, especially for Native Americans. So my family's like part Native American. So we, understand the role and importance of any wild creature. That their importance, but also recognize that they do have a utility. But also just the learning component. The secondary cultural component is the turtle races. And I'd just like to point out that I think we need to rethink what it means to educate a kid on turtles. So it's taking a turtle from the wild, taking 5 turtles from the wild, throwing them in a pool with 100 other turtles, and seeing if they walk to the perimeter quickly. I'm not sure what we're teaching a turtle. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing them, but I think we should rethink how we educate kids about turtles. My biggest thing is we should really educate people about turtles by watching turtles in the wild, not taking them out of their homes into our home, because indoor behavior or captive bred behavior. It does not reflect turtle behavior in the wild. Again, I could talk for hours, so I'm going to stop, but thank you for having me and thank you for listening. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Would it be possible, if you, all the material is interesting, we only have an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
If you would leave that with Representative Gardner or, one of us, and,
Sure,
if folks want to take their time, again, when the Chiefs are up by 50 points at halftime, you can read. No, I don't know. But no, I appreciate it. Any questions for Dr. Reed? Representative Shue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. This is just a comment, but it is genuinely refreshing seeing you here. We hear from a lot of lobbyists, no offense, who are very used to being up there, and it is obvious that you're not used to being up there. It is obvious how much you care about this issue, and I think we're all enriched from hearing your testimony today. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's my first time here, so thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Very good. Representative Minix.
We've already been told that humans seems to be the biggest source of the loss of the box turtle, and yet you say when they lay eggs past the age of 10 and they can live to 35, are there any other causes? Are there any other predators to the box turtle that we might need to consider if you're going to try to preserve this?
That is a great question. So I'm going to start by saying, most turtle mortality nowadays is because of tillers, plows, but mostly roads, mostly cars and vehicles on roads. People mowing grass is like the number one besides cars that I see, because I have turtles all the time that have transmitters on that clearly were killed by some sort of a piece of equipment. So that's number one still. So humans are top 7 for reasons why turtles die. After that, then as juveniles, as young as hatchlings, well, first you do have egg predation by coyotes and fox and badgers and possums and raccoons. And all those creatures I just listed will also, and bobcats, will consume them until they reach a certain size where basically they're too big for the jaws of these creatures. Their shells have hardened, their plastron and their carapace with the top and bottom have solidified, and these animals can no longer chew through them, and even raccoons can't pry them open. So once they reach adulthood, the only thing that's killing them are humans, and that has been true in the past as well. Turtles were have been the most successful vertebrate group for eons, just by kilograms per hectare. Just more turtles out there per acre or hectare than any other creature. And there's lots of reasons that I won't get into for why, but they are successful. Humans are the reason they're dying now.
You recognize this?
Yeah, that looks like pollution.
Yeah. And it lands in our habitat area out there.
Yeah.
And we see turtles. My wife's a veterinarian. I can show you pictures of baby kiffs.
Speak into my microphone.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
We Mylar balloons don't degrade within the environment. A turtle will try to take one in and suffocate.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's lots of other causes besides the predators out there, and some other things that humans do that also cause a problem. Are you willing to?
Sure. I could definitely, again, I could talk all day. So in addition to human activity related to machinery, I mean, obviously habitat loss just in general is a big killer of turtles. Habitat fragmentation off by railroads and by roadways also is a huge problem for turtles. These turtles range huge amounts of distance. So I track them. Like I said, we put transmitters on them. They cover, some turtles every year cover an area the size of 120 football fields. For a little turtle that's 5 to 6 inches long, that's huge. So they need a lot of habitat. They're wandering around looking for mates and resources and that type of thing. Other turtles don't move around nearly as much, but they're also highly phylopatric. And what that means is, and some of you probably have experienced this, like you have a garden, you always have a turtle that shows up every year. You just expect to see a turtle. That's their home. Their home may be a big area, but they return and use that same area every year. So anything we do in their home will kill them. So things like water pollution, soil pollution. A big thing that is a problem is when people are using fertilizers and pesticides. Those are also things in addition to other pollutants that will kill turtles. It's not a good time to be a turtle. It's not a good time to be any wild animal.
Okay. Representative Haswood?
I had a similar question, so I will take back. But
Very
thank
good.
you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the turtles are being taken to put in people's ponds for decoration and use.
And they're fully terrestrial. So those people do put them in ponds all the time and they drown because they don't know what a box turtle is.
Okay, so that was my question is that I have a backyard pond. I would love to have a turtle, except they're escape artists.
Yes.
So you have to have like an 18-inch fence up and down. So that I'm wondering, okay, you take this ornate turtle to your pond and then it escapes or dies. So then people just keep getting more and more, like it's a non-ending problem?
I cannot tell you again the number of stories I've had people tell me in the past 10 years or longer where people say they found a turtle, they put it in their pond. I'm like, well, first of all, this is a terrestrial turtle. They're technically capable of swimming, but they will eventually drown because they're not an aquatic turtle. If they somehow don't drown, they will walk away because, again, they're extremely philopatric. Similar to sea turtles, which we're all familiar with, they go out thousands of miles, return the exact same nesting beach to lay their eggs. These are what box turtles do too. They go out at super far distances, but they return to the site that they were born at to lay their own eggs. So this is called nest site fidelity. But they also have what we call home range philopatry, which is they want to live where basically they've imprinted on a particular habitat area. So if you move a turtle, the turtle tries to get back to where they want to go. They have superior navigation ability compared to lots of other animals. And so they die trying to get back to where they're trying to go. And the people are sad, kids are sad, and they try to go get another turtle. And it's just not, so as you said, it's a non-ending process. And, collecting one at a time doesn't solve the problem, but it's better than 5 at a time. So.
Right. Thanks. And I really appreciate your enthusiasm and the knowledge we're getting today.
Other questions? One quick one. What you did your dissertation where?
I did at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in Lincoln, Nebraska. Most of my field work was done at Cedar Point Biological Station, which is in western Nebraska. It's amongst a whole bunch of ranch land.
So you did your bachelor's from there too?
No, I did my bachelor's in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Mansfield University, north central Pennsylvania, kind of middle of nowhere.
So is that where you're from then?
Yes, yeah.
And so Nebraska has
turtles. Nebraska, so north central Pennsylvania is a cold climate, and there's not a lot of turtles there. There are some painted turtles, sliders, that type of thing. But yeah, my focus has always been on the box turtle and its plight. So there was a position open in Nebraska to study them, and I took it, and now I'm here.
And here being
Topeka. I'm operating out of Topeka.
As a freelancer or
I'm an assistant professor at Washburn University. Okay. And part of my position includes research, but that's the part that you probably could figure out that I love doing. So yeah.
Very good. Interesting. All right. Thank you. No other questions? Okay, we'll keep moving. Proponent, next up, Mr. Dennis Dinwiddie. Thank you for coming and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. A number of years ago, the 7 accredited zoos of Kansas became concerned about how many fewer box turtles we were seeing across the state. Zoos, as you know already, are no longer just places for people to go to view animals and to admire animals from around the world. They have become conservation organizations, and so they're deeply concerned about conservation across the board with everything. Much of what we like to work with is local because that's where our resources are, that's where our support is, and we like to make the biggest difference we can for local species. One of those being the box turtles. So back in 2019, the 7 accredited zoos of Kansas started a multi-year census for box turtles in Kansas, where each zoo and the 7 different counties that they represent across Kansas chose 2 different sites. One that had historical evidence of box turtles in it, one that had no historical evidence of box turtles in it, but was still equally good habitat for box turtles. This removed the opportunity for bias in the findings of any zoo in any county at any of their sites so that we would come up with the most accurate results that we could for a census on just how many box turtles do we have. And to keep all of us honest on the census itself, We actually brought in Dr. Reed from Washburn University to help to form that study to make it completely scientific. He was quite excited about that. Might be hard for you to believe, but he was quite excited about that. And he's done an excellent job of making sure that this is a box turtle population census that will be available for peer review on a scientific level. And so soon we hope to be able to bring you what will be the first actual census data on box turtles in Kansas, because the last census that was done in 1954 in only one county and for only 2 seasons. So even if that had been a viable study by being spread out more across the state, it would still be over half a century old and would not be viable now anyway. However, as Dr. Reed testified to, the problem with this is that with the slow metabolism of box turtles, with the slow reproduction rate of box turtles, that if we want to do something to help preserve our box turtles, our state reptile in the future, we need to act now to do that. The problem being is that many, if not most, of the other turtles, tortoises all around the globe are typically a single color on top, whether it be black, gray, green, tan, or whatever it be. Box turtles, however, as you know, are a darker color with the yellow markings, making them somewhat unique in the turtle tortoise, the Chelonian world, and so in high demand for the illegal pet trade all around the globe. And box turtles being once abundant in the Midwest here in the United States, everywhere between the Rockies and the Appalachians, this became the place for people to go to get them. And so while we certainly understand quite well, in fact, that there are numerous other reasons that we are losing our box turtles, one significant reason is something that we thought we might be able to help to do something about, which is that they are in demand around the globe. So they're collected here and then transported out of our state. So we understand that they're being transported out of our state, sometimes to other states, other parts of the country, but sometimes outside of our country. And we felt that one of the reasons for this is that the ability for people to legally collect up to 5 box turtles at a time made it possible then for them to collect them in larger numbers for that illegal transportation out of our state with them. Because when you can collect 5 and then just go hide them in the morning, then go collect 5 more in the afternoon, and then bring 10 of those together or more, it makes for a shipment of box turtles that can be considered quite profitable. So we started the census with the goal of being sure that we can come up with solid baseline scientific information on exactly where we stand, knowing that there's no way to ever understand exactly where we stand, because that would require a count of every box turtle in the state, which of course is not feasible, not possible. We rise to support this bill because it is an opportunity, and we consider a very logical opportunity to take actions now that will control at least part of the problem for why we are losing our box turtles, and to help to ensure that we still have ornate box turtles for future generations of Kansas to enjoy.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for Representative Probst?
Thank you, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, sir.
I want to ask you to expand a little bit, because I think that there's a point here that I think it's clear, but I want to dwell on it a little bit. People aren't getting these turtles and then just giving them away. I mean, there's a profit motive behind this, and being able to collect that many of them is incentivizing the collection for profit.
That is correct. Of course, the more that you collect, the more you can export. The more you export, the more money you make. So the issue with them, as I've learned from talking with law enforcement sources within Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, is that the export of them is quite easy. It's not always successful, but it's not difficult. You collect up 10 of them, you put them in a tube sock. You put that tube sock in a mailing tube. You put that mailing tube in the mail to wherever it's going out of country. And when it arrives there, they are sold for sometimes vast amounts of money, because they're in high demand but in low supply in other countries, so they're quite profitable. So if only 2 or 3 of them survive that mailing, then it is still quite profitable, and therefore a good reason for people in that business or in that expenditure to keep doing that. So.
Yes, Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Are you aware of any efforts at the federal level to kind of address the selling to interstate commerce or to other countries?
I can't claim any expertise on the federal laws involving this. I know that there certainly are federal laws that do prohibit the illegal exportation and importation of animals across our national borders. I know that the problem has gotten so bad that the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which is our accrediting body for all accredited zoos in the United States of America, they have discovered the problem to be so bad that they are now actively and aggressively engaged in trying to shut down the illegal export of turtles and tortoises one airport at a time. So going to one airport that is known to be a hub for illegal exportation of reptiles, including turtles and tortoises, out of our country, with the sniffer dogs, with the extra activity, and trying to make it difficult enough to mail them out or through those airports that it can slow it down. In fact, the accredited zoos of Kansas have been asked by the AZA, can you be a place that when we make large-scale confiscations of box turtles, for example, that you can be a place that we can get them to, because by the time we get them in these illegal shipments, they are quite unhealthy. So they need to go to someplace like a zoo or a place with specialty abilities for handling those turtles, returning them to health, and then trying to figure out the right way to reintroduce them into the wild in a way that does not damage the already established territories of other box turtles who need all the food, water, shelter, space of that area also. So it has become a big enough problem that national organizations like the AZA have had to become aggressively involved in trying to stem the export of our turtles and tortoises from the United States.
And this is more of a comment for the committee. It sounds like this is a much bigger problem than just what we're able to solve here. I would be open to exploring going into the future some sort of resolution, maybe to our federal delegation, to address this issue at a larger scale. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to do that, you can talk with the reviser and he'll do the right way if you want to do a resolution. Other questions? And you may not be the right one, but I'll ask, since you brought it up about the survey, and I know we don't have it yet, but we've talked about Kansas. You know, we all are assuming that probably the majority of turtles are in the western part of the state. Is that true, or is it still scattered a lot, or are there? Do we know that yet?
No, actually, we have lots of box turtles of the ones that are still available in our state, in the eastern half of the state as well, because box turtles will adapt to the habitats available to them. So there are box turtles in western Kansas who are adapted to the drier climates, for example, and they simply live differently. For example, they may decide to go underground for the day to escape the heat and come out and perform most of their survival activities crepuscular, so sun up and sunrise, and then nocturnal overnight, whereas here in the eastern state, they tend to be more active during the days. So box turtles in both western Kansas and eastern Kansas, they just have to live a little differently in response to the climate that they survive in.
All right, very good. And if we'll see if we have time, I may bring Dr. Reed back up later. So any other questions for Mr. Dinwiddie? Thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much.
We may have some more questions. Let's see. That's all I have on the list for proponents. Other proponents here? Seeing none, anyone want to testify neutral on the bill? So we'll get to you. You're well.
I think I've been changed.
If that's what you want to go, that's fine. So we welcome Dr. Spencer Toom here, and so welcome to committee.
Thank you. I wish I'd asked a different biologist now about how the box turtles were doing. I appreciate this opportunity to comment on the bill. My name is Spencer Toom. I'm a retired botany professor from Kansas State University, and I think this bill is not needed, because I think it can be done within the regulatory ways of the agency. And I think having what Brad Lovelace says he's going to do, I think that's the absolute best way to handle this. But I would like to say some other things that about this, and I would take back to say where I say it appears that they're doing well in native range in Kansas. They are probably in some places, not in every one of them. And there's a huge pressure on them if you're going to be manipulating your land all of the time. The dead box turtles have uses in culture. Native Americans make rattles with them. There's a dance that is done with these. So they have uses for the dead turtle, and they also have another use. This right here. This is a box turtle turkey call, and I've been making them for 30 years. How many turtles have I killed? 0. How many turtles have I walked across the highway and put them in a place where I was about to run over them? Lots, okay? I want to conserve turtles, but I want to be able to say that this isn't a turtle anymore. I've learned how to make these calls where they're really pretty good. I'd like to be able to continue making them. But if this bill is passed with the concurrent wording, I'm going to be an outlaw. And I haven't killed a turtle, ever. So that's, I hope that there's a way where we can lighten everybody's darkness to the problems that turtles have. I'm going to talk to Dr. Reed after this is over and see if I can talk him into writing an article for the National Wildlife Federation and get it out there about the problems with turtles. And I'll redouble my efforts to move them off the road. But I remember driving behind people in Oklahoma where when turtles were really moving after a rain, and they were running over every one of them that they could hit. And that mindset's got to be changed because this is an iconic species. They're absolutely beautiful. So anyway, I'll sit back and hope for everybody working for conservation of turtles. But I'd like to be able to continue to make these calls. I've made about 300 of them.
Can you stand up for a few questions? Representative Probst.
Well, I have two. The first one is with the chair's indulgence. I'd like to hear your turkey call. I used to do some turkey hunting, and I like to compare calls. Oh my God, that's great.
Thank you.
We have a few more, probably, so you bet.
Well, my second question is thanks for doing that. I was curious when you were holding up that, because I used to make wing bone calls, and I always like the sound of those too. So, so I'm always looking for a better call on that. But I'm wondering if the way this bill is worded, I just want to make sure, would he be in trouble for possessing a shell? Or is it just a live turtle, or would we need to tweak that a little bit?
Mr. Secretary, are you on the line?
Yes, sir, I still am.
What do you think about that one?
Yeah, so commercialization is what you can't do. And I'm been a beneficiary of one of Spencer's fantastic turkey calls to me as a gift. So that is legal. He just can't sell them.
Okay.
And that's the reason I've also made I've made a mold out of a dead box turtle, and I have cast them so I can still sell them.
Okay. Other questions for Dr. Toom? Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you for coming to committee. Other neutral testimony? Seeing none, any opponents of the bill? I have none, but anybody else there? No one online? Okay, with that, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2479. Okay, then that is what is on our agenda today. For again, the committee, we will release this week's minutes tomorrow afternoon, so you can peruse them anytime, and then we will ask for a final review and approval next week. We will not meet tomorrow. We will not meet Monday. We will meet Tuesday. And so we have a busy Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. We'll have a few more bill hearings. We will have a presentation and update from Dr. Minton from Kansas State University, as is every year. And we'll also start a kind of a mini series, if you will, examining the Kansas food system. And we're going to have 2 or 3 of those, maybe more as we go along. There's some other committees doing that, and we think from an agriculture standpoint, we want to not expose the committee, but maybe help in that if there's some things we can do as a state. So anything else for the good of the cause? And again, if we could, Dr. Reed, share some of your information that you have if we want to learn more. So very interesting. Representative Gardner, thanks for bringing this to our attention. So with that, we are adjourned.